So this video that we're going to see is a landscape designer's garden for birds. It's Valerie Matzger's garden in Piedmont. The video was made by Ellyce Morgan, and we're certainly grateful to Ellyce for making this video. Valerie, I see you, and I'm just going to go ahead and just show a few photos of your garden before we get started. Valerie, what I find so interesting about your garden in particular is that you had a primarily non-native plant garden, and then you took out your established plants and you put in natives. Would you tell us why?
Because of Doug Tallamy, really, in a word. My husband and I went down to a gathering by Santa Clara Valley Native Plant Society at Foothill College, and I heard him speak, and I just was so impacted because I've been designing gardens since 1989, and the main thing is they have to be pretty and they have to be low maintenance, and just what people want. Not, I want it to look good, but that's it. It only had to look good. And so he really spoke to me. And I love birds. So I was on a collision course, basically. If I really wanted to help birds, which are in terrible, terrible straits right now in our world, then I needed to do something. Then the plague hit, COVID hit, and I stopped designing gardens, having any contact with the outside world as everybody else did, same thing, except you, Kathy, and started concentrating on what I could do. And I had lawns front and back on my own garden, and so I just decided to, go native.
All right, so let's look at a couple of pictures. Here we are in the day of last year's tour. Here's Verbena de la Mina. So this garden is about, what, 2 years old, Valerie? Is that right?
The front garden is, this will be its second summer, this summer.
Yeah. This is amazing. Like, this is less than 2 years.
That's right, it is.
Yeah. I also want to say this is a hillside garden. There are a lot of stairs in this garden, and this is the back. So you come down the stairs and there's this path that loops around the large backyard. This photo was taken in different seasons, but it's really a lovely walk. Valerie, how many species of birds have you seen in your garden? Do you know offhand?
I'm up to 48. It's very seasonal. The yellow-rumped warblers come, and then the yellow-rumped warblers leave, and it's just a wonderful environment. It just keeps the garden so animated and changing. And to go out there and work and to hear the bird song all around is just wonderful.
I bet it's really just a beautiful, beautiful garden. So what are we seeing in flower here, Valerie?
Oh boy. Okay, that's Wayne Roderick, Seaside Daisy in the front. And then you're having the red eriogonum, the buckwheat, red flowered buckwheat beyond. And there's my redwood tree and my neighbor's eucalyptus patch beyond.
Okay.
And the eucalyptus not being native, however, red-tailed hawks and great horned owls nest in those eucalyptus trees. So, I'm torn. What can I say?
I love this picture. Valerie sent it. So are these all natives?
They are totally all natives. I went out into my garden in August, which is, let's face it, downtime in most native gardens. And I just sort of picked through and found what was still going on. And my friends gave me this little vase, which I adore, and I just made a collection. And yeah, some of the things are, rose hips, the California native rose hips. And yeah, they're all native, every one of them.
That's beautiful. Well, on this cheerful note, let's go look at the video of Valerie's garden.
Birds lend an animation and a liveliness to the garden that I never remember before I made a bird garden. I never remember feeling like that was a big garden feature. Now, that's a huge part of this garden experience.
I'm Valerie Matzger, and welcome to my native garden. It's a young garden as far as native gardens go. I started the rear garden in about January of 2020. The planted area is about 12,000 square feet, which is a little over 1/4 of an acre. It was originally lawn in the front and the back. I began in the back, and so the lawn was most of the rear garden. It just was a sloping lawn that no one ever set foot on. There was no reason for it to be there. And so that was removed and walls were put in. I basically terraced on a curvilinear pattern. The dry laid stone walls. I love dry laid stone walls because they're very time honored in their construction. They don't break. There's no mortar to come loose. The stones just sit by gravity. So well constructed dry laid stone wall is really a wonderful thing. The water that falls on the land just seeps through the face of the stones instead of building up pressure, which is usually the ruin of most constructed walls. So, and all the spaces between the stones are opportunities for plants, and I've noticed native bees going in between those stones too. So I think there's some bee households being set up in there. Then the front yard was done 2 years later in early 2022. So it's really young. It's now going into its second summer, the front garden. So it's, as I said, it's a fairly new garden. The reason that I launched into this project is really due to Doug Tallamy. My husband and I went to a talk that the Santa Clara Valley Native Plant Society held at Foothill College, and Doug spoke. And he said something that really stuck with me, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to misquote him. In the past, we have asked one thing of our gardens, that they be pretty. Now they have to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water. And this really hit me. I have been designing gardens since 1989, and he's quite right. But I had a chance here with COVID to just back off all of my other work and concentrate on my own property. And I realized that I was full of lawns, which were doing absolutely nothing for my very favorite animal in the world, which are birds. All of them. I love birds. And birds are, besides being fascinating to watch and beautiful, are also harbingers of the state of our environment. And when bird populations crash, which they did, Tallamy says that the journal Science in 2019 reported that 3 billion North American breeding birds have disappeared since 1970. That's about 1/3 of the bird population, which is pretty horrifying. And well, why is that? A lot of it is development, climate change, predation by outdoor cats, window collisions. Habitat loss is probably the biggest chunk of that. To make it a bird garden in particular, of course, you have to think about, well, what do birds love? What will increase bird numbers? What will pollinators be attracted to? Because birds don't exist in a vacuum. They need insects. So I really sometimes feel like, I'm growing soil, and B, I'm really a bug gardener. I am growing insects to feed the birds. So a really wonderful site for me has been the Calscape site. You can put in your zip code, and you can hit calscape.org, put in your zip code, and put in your requirements, like how much water will a plant take, how much sun does it need, and Calscape will tailor a list of native plants that will work in your area. So that is a good place to begin. And of course, we have lots of native plant nurseries. So to make it particularly a bird garden, I needed plants that were valuable for birds. The second thing is water. Water features are hugely important in a bird garden. Birds require water to not just drink, but to groom their feathers And so that was an important thing. And one of the early things we put in, actually, before I made this garden, we did an original garden plan 45 years ago, and a local landscape architect who did my garden at that time, David Thorne, who's wonderful, designed a pond, a little pond, and an upper pond and a lower pond with a little waterfall. And that's one thing that has stayed in place, David's waterfall, and the birds love it. In the front, I installed a fountain, more of a formal affair with a bubbler, which the hummingbirds and the lesser goldfinches use a lot. They're very attracted to the bubbler on top. And then up on this upper terrace, right outside this breakfast room, is just a simple little plant saucer, a little terracotta saucer that you put underneath the terracotta pots with some drippers in it. So every day fresh water goes into that. I clean that. I can just pick it up and bring it in the kitchen and clean it and put it back maybe twice a week. And that is really a bird magnet. That is one of their favorite places. Then, okay, other things to make the bird garden a bird garden. I had to figure out a way to exclude deer. The problem is that deer don't have any predators in this area, although mountain lions have been sighted on the street behind me, on people's Ring doorbells. There has been a mountain lion, and we know there are coyotes, but deer are a prey species. They're programmed to reproduce at a pretty good rate to keep their numbers up. So I had to figure out a way to exclude deer because they leave nothing for the birds. Their population is just astronomical, and they take it down to the soil. I mean, especially natives, because deer are not dumb. They evolved with native plants. They love native plants, except for the smelly ones like the salvias, the usual suspects that they don't like too much. But mostly they love native plants. So I put up some very unobtrusive wire fencing, 6 feet, and then I had risers above with cables to take it to 8 feet because that's what deer can jump. With my neighbor's agreement, that was put in, and it has been the reason I could have the native garden, because without it, the deer sit and look longingly through the wire fence. And I feel kind of mean about that, but what are you going to do? They have all my other neighbors' gardens that they can eat, and I have to keep them out because they would really decimate the native plants. The other thing is that my neighbors adore cats. I adore cats, but I adore cats indoors. My neighbors, not so much. Their cats wander around, and of course cats are hunters. They're programmed to hunt. It's what they do best. And they come into my garden, and I have not found a way to exclude cats, except I yell at them when they come in, which just does nothing at all. So I just hope that they're not very good hunters, the cats that visit my garden. But sometimes I'll be working along and I'll just stop and listen, because there's so much bird activity now in this garden. I've made a list of 48 species that I've seen in this garden, which I think is pretty remarkable. I don't back onto vast open space or a great waterway or anything like that. It's just, a suburban patch in the middle of a small town. And 48 species is like not bad. And it's such a joy. And you really get a sense of the movement of the seasons. I know when I hear the mourning dove, things are starting off. That's like one of the early birds in January. The doves come and they like to nest in the scuppers around the house every year. We have the usual, Stella's jays, of course, very, very raucous, not a rare bird. I did have a western tanager once, which was memorable. Those are the ones you see by rivers and the mountains. They're the red and yellow. Oh my gosh, that bird's got it all. I did see that once. That would be fun to see that one again. And I have the variety of wonderful woodpeckers. And the biggest woodpecker, which I love, spends more time on the ground. It's the flicker, the northern flicker, and it has black circles, perfect round dots all over the breast, and a huge black necklace of, oh, it's such a glorious bird. And then the Nuttall's woodpecker and the hairy and the downy. I've got all the usual woodpecker suspects. The spotted towhee, it's not as numerous as the California towhee, which we have a lot of the more of a brown bird on the ground. The spotted towhee is like the fancy one. It's black and white with rufous, really warm brown breast mostly, and then a lot of white spots on the black feathering. It's a very great, and a red eye. It has such a red eye. Let's see what else. Lesser goldfinches, lots of lesser goldfinches. And they come pretty much spring, summer. They hang out here, and they're the seed eaters. You know, that they really love the flower seeds that I leave on for them. We inherited a fabulous coast live oak when we moved into this house. So that is like the big leg up. I mean, if you have room and there's only one thing you can do for the world and nature generally, plant an oak. Oaks are like the keystone species of all keystone species for the life that they support, mostly through moths who lay eggs that become caterpillars, and caterpillars are the preferred food for baby birds. There's no hard exoskeleton. They're soft, they're full of protein, they're full of fat. Caterpillars are like the perfect bird food for bird babies. Very important. So after that, then I had to think about other keystone species, and another very good one, well, there are many, the elderberry. I planted about 5 elderberries around here, and they are wonderful bird food, and they're the preferred food of lots of moths that lay their eggs on them. And you'll see lots of damage on my leaves, on my plants, and I say, that's really good, because that means they're doing their part for the environment. My plants are being eaten, and they are producing life. Another great keystone species is hollyleaf cherry, and I have 2 of those, and they produce a very luscious cherry that's great bird food. And again, you know, you will see chewing on their leaves. So I'm looking down. This is part of my plant list. There's the rest. And it's changing all the time, but it mostly stays the same. But there are a few things I've planted that don't succeed, and that's okay. And there are some things that have succeeded too well, which I decided, ooh, I can't live with you. You're just overrunning the place. And so I had to get rid of a few things, but I put in some things to take their place that are also keystone species. So we've got the oak, elderberry, hollyleaf cherry, ceanothus. Ceanothus is a wonderful keystone species, and I will put in a plug for the arboreal form of ceanothus. It's called Ceanothus arboreus Cliff Schmidt. It has the most wonderful shade of blue. Mine starts blooming in September, and it is still in full bloom now. As we film this in March, it's still covered with flowers, covered with native bees, and it's got some leaf damage, so someone's chewing it. It is a fantastic small tree. Another fabulous keystone bones of the garden plant are the coffee berries. Used to be called rhamnus, now they're frangula. I have Eve case running up to block my view of the driveway. Eve case is a great mid-sized coffee berry. I have an original species coffee berry, which is much less dense than Eve Case. It's Frangula californica, and it's rises up. It's more see-through, more diaphanous. I have sticky monkey flower, which is another keystone species, and many cultivars of monkey flower, the mimulus, the jelly bean series for color. The hummingbirds love all of the monkey flowers because it's that tubular shaped flower which hummingbirds specialize in, and they really do like it. And the cultivars are still a value. Not all cultivars, when they do doubling of flowers, like spice bush, there's a Ralston's spice bush that is prized because it's doubled. But when they double it, it's no longer of much use to pollinators. So that's one kind of development that's not useful for pollinators if you're looking for plant, cultivated varieties of plants. The other problem is for pollinators, is when they breed a plant for red leaves. To pollinators, red leaves are not a good thing. It means there are a lot of anthocyanins in the leaves, and it's not what they're looking for. The other wonderful hummingbird plant, of course, are the sages, and another keystone species. They lend incredible fragrance to the flowers, and the hummingbirds love them. The bees love them. I have Allen Chickering, and I also have Winifred Gilman. Winifred has a more deep blue flower than Allen Chickering, and she's just as attractive to pollinators as Allen Chickering. I also have Salvia mellifera, black sage, which is really like the least showy, but very popular with pollinators, so I do have that one too. I have another keystone species are the ribes, which are spring blooming. You want plants that have something to offer year round. So that means things that are winter blooming largely, because that's what's usually missing. So at that point, ribes really come into their own as far as providing nectar sources for pollinators. But the birds need cover. So the way you grow the shrubs, it's not always about opening up the lower levels of the shrub so that you see the structure of the trunks, which can be very pretty, but be sure to leave some that are more shrubby and are touching the ground and providing these hiding places and these nesting places for birds. So it's also the way you garden that's rather important. We know that gardens really, by their nature, aren't finished unless they're super mow and blow, keep it the same garden forever. And that is part of a garden. It just changes all the time. It's endlessly fascinating. Never really a chore because you get out there and just even on a day that you might think, oh, it's kind of cloudy and it's only 52. Do I really want to go out there? I don't know. You go out there and you start working and you hear the birds and time flies. It's just a good time. It's really a joy. So the fact that the garden is never done is just a big plus as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that was just a fantastic video, and I want to thank you, Valerie, for being so composed and being filmed. And I want to thank Ellyce for making such a great video. I want to also add, because I see there's been a lot of conversation about cats. So I love cats and you love cats, but cats kill birds. And the best thing is to keep your cats indoors if you can. And if you can't keep your cat indoors, then keep your cat indoors as much as you can. And if that doesn't work, then the next time you get a kitten, train it right from the beginning and keep it indoors. Cats kill billions of birds in the United States every year. I want to thank our sponsor, Native Here Nursery, for supporting the tour. Native Here is an all-volunteer project of the California Native Plant Society's East Bay chapter. Native Here is dedicated to growing locally native plants that are sourced from ethically collected seeds and cuttings from Alameda and Contra Costa counties, and providing these plants to customers at its nursery in Tilden Park. As you've heard, local native plants provide the best habitat for our local wildlife. The nonprofit Native Here Nursery is open year-round every Saturday from 10 to 2 for in-person shopping or online order pickup. You can visit Native Here online at nativeherenursery.org for information about locally native plants, to check out the current inventory, place an order for pickup on Saturdays, or to learn about volunteer opportunities. You can call Native Here Nursery at 510-549-0211 or email them at nativehere@ebcnps.org with your questions.